Chapter 18. Seeds of Discord. 4 of the 6 Toa waited at the bottom of the pitch-dark cave. The opening was a straight drop of more than 600 feet with little to cling to, making the climb down an unfeasible task, especially with Onua's injury. Instead, Lewa offered to make 5 separate trips with the aid of his Kanohi Miru to transport each Toa safely to the bottom. Due to his natural affinity for deep and dark spaces, Onua was brought down first. Tahu was next, who used his sword to provide much-needed illumination as Gali and Pohatu made their descents. Now they just waited for Lewa to return with Kopaka before they could continue down the tunnel.
"Here they come,"
Tahu announced, holding his flaming sword over his head as Lewa slowly descended with Kopaka. From the moment their feet touched the cold and stony ground, the Toa started down the tunnel. The flickering glow of Tahu's sword revealed the walls to be metallic and abnormally smooth, descending at only a slight angle with an occasional curve. Neither Onumatoran machinery nor precise Pomatoran carving could achieve the featurelessness that the tunnel presented. It was unnatural.
"Something is very wrong here,"
Pohatu said as he ran his hand along the surface of the walls.
"I don't know what could have made these tunnels, but they weren't created with any tools we've ever seen."
Whatever it is,
Gali replied.
we can handle it.
The Toa halted when they noticed Lewa had fallen behind. He had abruptly stopped walking as his body began to sway. He pressed his hand against the wall to steady himself while he tugged the side of his kanohi. After a few seconds, he shook his head dismissively and caught back up to the rest of the team.
"Are you all right?"
Onua asked.
"I'm good, fine,"
Lewa replied unconvincingly.
"I just false thought I heard something."
Tahu narrowed his eyes toward Lewa as they continued down the tunnel. As they rounded a corner, they began to hear the familiar clangs of movement echoing out from further down their path, followed by glints of glowing eyes rapidly approaching. Tahu held out his sword and braced for the incoming swarm.
"Ready your weapons, Toa!"
Tahu called.
"It's time for another round."
"Wait, Tahu."
Lewa said.
"Not this time."
Tahu snapped toward the Toa of Air.
"What?"
"We aren't true certain how many there are in this group swarm, and we can't afford to risk it. Let them pass."
"And let them destroy another Wahi?"
"Remember, Tahu,
Onua said.
this isn't the only tunnel. If we choose to fight them now, there could be 10 more swarms that reach the surface by the time we're finished. It's not worth it."
"And if Lee was right about the hive mind,
Pohatu added.
one missed wave won't make a difference when we destroy them all. We need to save our energy."
Tahu stepped out of his defensive stance.
"Valid point. I hate it, but valid nonetheless. Hug the wall."
The other Toa followed Tahu's lead and pressed themselves against the eerily smooth walls, allowing the swarm to pass. Tahu lessened the intensity of the flames of his blade, but still spared a slight illumination as the Bohrok raced by. Despite their urges to prevent the creatures from reaching the island, the Toa stood deathly still. They were by no means hidden, with many of the Bohrok even brushing against them as they passed, but they were completely ignored. The wait was grueling. Between the near-total darkness and the speed at which the compact swarm traveled, conducting a proper account of their numbers was virtually impossible. It was easily more than 100 or 200. Near the end of the train of monsters, they were tailed by a group of smaller creatures that, while shared many similarities with the Bohrok, were unlike the others. Their bodies were gaunt and slight compared to the rotund Bohrok, and their heads were flat and protected by a saucer-like headplate. Behind their fluttering insectoid wings were enlarged pouches that bounced and shuffled with every scampering step. Soon after the swarm had passed, the Toa stepped away from the walls.
What were those things in the back?
Gali asked.
We haven't encountered those before, have we?
"I don't think so.
said Pohatu.
Bohrok Va.
Answered Lewa.
Their purpose job is to maintain the nest hive, and they'd serve the swarm.
Why haven't we seen them before?
Tahu asked.
Because they aren't meant built to go to the surface land. This isn't normal.
So I start now?
Asked Kopaka.
Maybe the unexpected setback caused by the Matoran has forced them to change their tactics.
Onua guessed.
Whatever the reason cause, when we have to battle fight again, take them out first. They won't put up much of a hard fight, but they will undermine our own efforts against the Bohrok beasts in any way they can.
Noted,
said Tahu.
Let's keep moving.
Making their way deeper into the tunnel, Lewa slowly started to take the lead. Tahu slowed his pace until he lagged near the back of the group, finding himself walking beside Gali while the others were growing farther ahead. Although they refrained from moving too far away from the Toa of Fire as to not lose their only source of light.
Keep an eye on Lewa,
Tahu murmured to Gali in a low tone.
Why?
Gali replied.
Something is off. I think he might still be influenced by the Kana.
What? Why would you think that? His knowledge could end up being vital to our success.
Just look at the way he's been acting. Every time we encounter a swarm, he freezes. He said he thought he heard something when no one else did. And that was right before we were passed by that group. He did the same thing before we came down here. He can still hear them. And who knows what they're telling him.
You actually think he's going to turn on us?
I don't know what to think. Just stay vigilant. This mission is too important.
Listen to yourself, Tahu. He is your brother. The mission is too important for us to be turning against each other.
I know that. I want to trust him, but we can't be sure.
Then why don't you give him a chance to prove himself before throwing out these ridiculous accusations?
Tahu said nothing in response. He quickened his pace to catch up to the others before they strayed too far from the illumination of his blade. He kept his eyes fixed on Lewa, yet Gali's rebuke left him torn. He couldn't quell his suspicions entirely, but he decided they were best kept to himself for the time being.
We're getting ever close,
Lewa announced.
The air is point leading to an opening.
The Toa moved with greater caution as they neared the end of the descent. Confirming Lewa's report, the tunnel gave way to an opening. They could hear the sounds of innumerable Bohrok rustling and beetling on the other side.
Is this it?
Pohatu asked. Kopaka studied the other side with his Kanohi Akaku before giving a reply.
Yes, we're here.
With Lewa still taking point, the Toa passed into the opening. They stepped out into an exponentially vast ring-shaped cavern that stretched far beyond their field of view in both directions. Tahu immediately withdrew the flames of his sword and returned the weapon to his back, as the multicolored sea of glowing eyes provided more than enough illumination. Thousands upon thousands of Bohrok clung to the walls and sloping ceiling that rose far above the Toa's heads as they each patiently waited their turn to be assigned to the next group to make for the surface. The mess of screeching echoes of metallic movements and chittering cries polluted the air. Hundreds of Bohrok Va weaved through their ranks, poking and prodding the larger creatures to ensure they were properly fit for their tasks. Some of them even removed the Kana from the Bohrok's heads and swapped them out with new ones from the pouches on their backs.
Keep your weapons stored,
said Tahu.
Don't draw too much attention. They haven't acknowledged us yet. Let's keep it that way.
There!
Lewa called out, pointing to the giant cylindrical pillar wall that the cavern wrapped around.
The Barrack Queen's chamber room is inside there.
Lewa's voice had begun to trail off before he suddenly pressed his hands against his mask and tucked his head toward the ground. His knees buckled as he strained to stay upright against the abrupt mental assault. It subsided only moments later, and when he straightened himself, He found the rest of the team staring at him.
We aren't taking another step until you tell us what's going on with you.
Tahu demanded. Lewa conceded, realizing the futility of hiding his condition.
I can still heal them. I fought hard to snub shun it, but the deeper we go, the louder they become. They're still firm trying to control me.
I told you!
Tahu blurted as he pointed toward Gali, causing a nearby Bohrok Va to snap toward him before quickly losing interest.
This is what I was talking about. He is putting us at risk. Is now really the time for this?
Pohatu asked.
Only because we didn't address it sooner. How do we know he's not leading us into a trap?
Lewa took a step back, stunned by the accusation.
What? Tahu, I would never betray across you all.
Tahu looked over at Onua's shoulder.
It's already happened once.
Onua strode between Tahu and Lewa, shoving Tahu back. The sudden and unexpected move from the benevolent Toa of Earth caught Tahu off guard, giving him no choice but to listen to what he had to say.
Lewa has done everything he can to help us get this far. And as I recall, the last time we were in an unexplored cavern together, the only one here that posed a threat to the rest of us was you, Tahu.
Onua's words struck Tahu as if an anvil had been dropped on his chest. He glanced back to find Pohatu, Gali, and Kopaka staring at him in disapproval, while Lewa's eyes projected a blend of shame and betrayal. All the anger he exuded instantly redirected back toward himself.
I know.
Tahu stammered, unable to conjure a more substantial response before Onua continued to speak.
It's no secret that our decision to let you lead was controversial, to say the least. But it was your passion and drive that influenced that decision. Don't make us regret it.
Your temper is a terrible curse, but has its uses.
Gali added.
Much like Lewa's current condition, it would be best if you aimed it at the Bohrok instead of your allies.
Tahu turned his face away from the rest of the group. He clenched his fists and steadied his breath before looking back at Lewa.
Are you fit to keep moving?
Yes.
Lewa assured.
Heart promise.
Good. Then let's go.
The rest of the Toa followed Tahu as he started toward their destination. They waded through the ocean of Bohrok, careful not to attract their attention. The creatures paid little attention to them, aside from the few that would brush across them, stop to inspect them, and turn back to their own business once they incorrectly deemed them to be harmless. When the Toa reached nearly halfway across the room, they could see a giant round doorway on the outside of the chamber. It was sealed shut, and when they moved closer, they could see 8 square-shaped indentions forming a circle in the ground just before the shut door.
How do we get in?
Gali asked. Tahu knelt down and inspected the slots. They each shared the same size and general shape, but carried minor differences.
Just like the entrance to Makuta's lair. We'll need to insert designated keys to open the door. More keystones?
Said Pohatu.
I wish we'd known that ahead of time. Not keystones,
Tahu replied, peering closer toward the indentions.
8 slots, 8 chronotypes.
Makes sense,
said Onua.
It ensures only the Bohrok can access the chamber.
Well, the good news is we've got thousands to choose from,
Pohatu said.
The bad news is they won't just hand them over.
Kopaka cut in.
We don't have much choice.
Tahu said as he stood up and reached back to grip the long handle of his sword.
We'll need to be quick.
Wait,
Gali interjected.
are you sure this is the right move? The second we strike at them, we'll have tens of thousands of Bohrok bearing down on us at once.
She's right.
Said Kopaka.
We wouldn't last 10 seconds.
Then we'll make sure we do it in 9.
Tahu said.
Unless there's another way in.
Onua said, turning to Lewa.
Not that I'm privy-wise to.
Lewa replied.
All I know is that the Barag are for true certain on the other side of that doorway.
So, we collect the Krana and open the door.
Pohatu said.
What happens next? How do we stop the swarm from funneling in after us? We find a way to shut it before they can reach us.
Tahu replied.
We'll worry about the exit plan afterward.
This is a horrible idea.
Gali sighed.
I don't disagree. But does anyone have a better plan?
The rest of the Toa exchanged glances, but none spoke up.
Focus on the Bohrok Va,
Lewa said.
They carry bear multiple Krana on their backs.
Understood,
said Tahu.
Gali, Kopaka, and I will focus on collecting the Krana. Lewa, Onua, and Pohatu, you will be our crowd control. Are we ready?
The Toa nodded before getting into position according to Tahu's assignment. They each drew their weapons, which gained the attention of a few nearby Bohrok, but none retaliated. Tahu scanned the sea of Bohrok until he selected the nearest Bohrok Va, which had its back turned to the Toa.
Now!
He shouted, lunging forward and tearing open the pouch on the creature's back. 3 Krana spilled onto the ground at Tahu's feet. As expected, the numberless swarm that painted the room snapped their glowing eyes toward the Toa before the Bohrok Va's body had fully dropped. Tahu gathered the Krana from the ground and began placing them in their assigned slots. More than a dozen Bohrok pursued him, but Onua slammed his fist onto the floor and generated a directional shockwave that knocked them off their feet.
5 more!
Called Tahu over the commotion, before he kicked away a Levok that had slipped through the defense and targeted another Bohrok Va. Kopaka knocked a Va to the ground with his shield and sliced open its pouch. He sifted through the Krana inside, finding 2 more. He compared them to the ones Tahu had already collected, finding neither of them to be duplicates. While he was placing them in the correct positions, Pohatu was hard at work bashing through the unyielding barrage that came their way. With the strength of the Toa of stone put behind the durability of the Bohrok headplates, he used his new gauntlets to smash down all those that came close. He blocked the pecking strike of a Nuvok, knocking it back and exposing its chest, which Pohatu jammed into with the fangs attached to the gauntlets and pried it apart. Gali scooped up a Krana that flung out of the headplate of an unfortunate Korok that went against Pohatu, but discarded it when she saw that it was one of the kinds that had already been retrieved. She punctured the pouch of another Bohrok Va, causing 3 Krana to fall out. Again, all of them were duplicates, rendering them useless. Lewa stayed close beside her, spraying a hurricane torrent toward the oncoming swarm. Onua smashed the headplate of the next Tanakh in line, but was flanked by 2 Galak. They pounced onto him, attacking his wounded shoulder. Onua struggled against the attack, desperately battling to pull them away, but was quickly overwhelmed when 3 more attacked from the other side. Even with his Pakari active, he was unable to eliminate them all. Lewa rushed to his aid and blasted the growing pile off of the Toa of Earth's body. Lacking the time to climb to his feet, Lewa grabbed his uninjured shoulder and dragged him closer to the door, taking out a pouncing Parok with his axe as he did so. Once he ensured Onua was against the door, he leapt back into the fight to drive back the dozens of Bohrok that took advantage of the break in the defense. Tahu activated his Kanohi Hau to protect himself against the waist-deep flood of attacking Bohrok as he wildly and indiscriminately swung his sword to push them back, hoping a Krana or 2 would surface amidst the chaos. He cleaved apart a Bohrok Va, causing the contents of its pouch to fly into the air. He was able to catch one of the 3 ejecting Krana, pleased to see it was one of the 3 types they required. He shoulder charged through to the slots on the floor and plugged it into its spot. When he turned to find the other 2 Krana, he quickly realized he would have no chance of retrieving them against the thickening sea of Bohrok without the help of Pohatu or Lewa, who both had their hands full.
Tahu!
Kopaka called, catching the attention of the Toa of Fire before tossing the next required Krana over the heads of the mob. Tahu jumped up and swiped the mask from the air. He shot a fireball into the face of a Korok to knock it back, giving him time to place the Krana into its slot. Gali pulled her hooks from the side of a Bohrok's skull and kicked back the one behind her. She hooked another Va, ripping open the pouch and hastily checking the contents inside. None of the Krana within matched the final slot they needed to fill. Directly behind her, Pohatu was leaving a trail of broken Bohrok as he tore and plowed through them with his headplate gauntlets, but more were coming still. Tahu managed to create enough space to see a portion of the ground, which revealed a discarded Krana. To his frustration, it was yet another duplicate. He was forced to pause his search to hack through 3 more Bohrok that charged him. He peered into their headplates, finding nothing but more duplicates. Meanwhile, Lewa was assisting Pohatu in driving back the swarm. For every Bohrok they destroyed, another slipped past them. Concentrating his power, he summoned a cyclone that ripped through all the Bohrok in his area, sending parts and abandoned Krana spraying in all directions. Through sheer luck, one of those Krana landed at Gali's feet. She scooped it up, finding it to be the exact match of the final slot.
Everyone, get to the door!
She shouted over the commotion.
I have it!
The other Toa pushed through the overwhelming swarm, inching closer toward the sealed doorway as Gali fought to clear herself a path. She leaped out of the way just as a Levok rammed its head toward her and sprinted toward the empty slot. A Korok sprayed its icy vapor in hopes of halting her charge. In one fluid motion, Gali dropped beneath the blast and slid across the floor, placing the Krana in its spot before springing back to her feet. In an instant, the door hissed open and the Toa ran inside. Lewa continued to spray a force of wind toward the ones that tried to funnel inside after them. Before they could reach the Toa, Kopaka shot an ice spear into one of the Krana placed in the floor, disrupting the connection to the doorway and causing it to drop shut, crushing 2 Bohrok in the process. The deafening sound of the full Bohrok swarm was suddenly cut off, making way for an eerie silence.
We're locked in,
Onua said as Lewa assisted him to his feet.
Yes, we are,
Said Tahu.
Bad news for the queens.